This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hi, my name is Pamela Fuselli, and I'm the host of Popping the Bubble Wrap. Are you the person in your family who worries about the safety of others, about buying safety products and using them? Are you yelling, "Yes, that's me"? This is the podcast for you. Raising a child or children can be a hair-raising undertaking, and keeping them safe is a priority. Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast explores what you really need to think about as a parent or caregiver, and provides easy tips on prevention strategies. No bubble wrap here, though. Children can seem like tireless balls of energy at times. It's a beautiful part of childhood, that almost boundless will to move, laugh, and most importantly, play. It's tremendously good for children to engage in movement and play. Equally, it's important for us as parents to allow our kids to tire themselves out. How else would we ever get those precious moments of peace and quiet after bedtime? In this episode, we're going to discuss strategies for managing risks associated with the spaces our children play in. Joining me today are Brittany, Ashley, and Erin. I'm so happy that you're part of Parachute's Popping the Bubble Wrap podcast today.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having us.
Why don't we start with the fun stuff first? What kind of play activities or spaces do your kids enjoy playing the most? Ashley, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, they definitely love playgrounds. I have 3 kids, 3 daughters, actually. They're 9, 7, and 4. Yeah, we like going to playgrounds. There's definitely a lot of indoor play that we often try to move outdoor, just for the space aspect. For the girls, it's a lot of gymnastics. It's using the slides. It's the monkey bars, lots of monkey bars. So they're I guess, the typical kid things that they like to do.
That sounds fun. Yeah, and I was thinking about outdoor play spaces, but you're right. There's in the winter, in the months that are colder, there's indoor options as well. Erin, what do your 2 girls like to do?
So much like Ashley, like playgrounds are a big thing, but other places where they like to play, we live close to the beach, so they actually love almost all seasons, with the exception of like the deep of winter. Playing on the beach is a big place for them. So with the rocks or the shells or even, sometimes in the water. But inside, and I don't know if this is just my little one being a total monkey. She's just 2. She loves jumping on the couch. There is, or furniture. Like there is no piece of furniture that she does not see as a jungle gym. That's the inside struggle that we constantly have.
Both like keeping the life of your furniture alive, right? But also, they weren't built for play specifically, but luckily a lot of them, like couches, are soft.
Well, every time she does it, I look at my husband and say, "This is why we can't have nice things yet."
Yet.
It's just like, no, just because for the next 5 years, it's going to be a jungle gym.
That's right. Brittany, what about your 2? You have a young girl and a boy as well, a son.
Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter. They're both much more into nature. I'm sure they would love to live near the beach, but we have plains and trees all around us. And my son is perfectly happy just walking from tree to tree and feeling the bark and smelling them and things like that, while my daughter climbs as high as she can, as fast as she can every time.
So she's attracted to the heights.
Yeah.
Well, and she is a bit older as well, so probably has been honing her climbing skills for quite a few years.
Definitely, yeah.
So Ashley, you talked about playgrounds, and so did you, Erin, as well, about those built playgrounds that we often see, the slides, the monkey bars, the swings. And there's different play space environments that we do have, but let's talk about those type of built playgrounds that are in a lot of communities. What concerns you most about those environments when your kids go to play on them? Is it the environments themselves, or is it also getting to and from the playgrounds?
when it comes to the built playgrounds, we do go to a lot of them, and we're constantly trying to find new ones and what is out there. So when the playgrounds are like obviously newer builds, I almost have no concerns. It like looks really safe. You can feel how safe it is under your feet. And there's lots of different levels for different ages. So I tend to gravitate towards those because I have 3 kids of all different ages. It's the playgrounds that are still older, much older. They're either brand new or they're really old. And it's the older ones. And sadly, there's an older one at our elementary school, that the ones that my kids play on daily. And they're 2 older playgrounds that they do look a little, they're rough around the edges. And it's mostly, I think my biggest thing with them is that it almost doesn't feel age appropriate when you compare it to what you're seeing now and the safety that I'm feeling when my kids are at the newer playgrounds. So you can look at it one way and say, well, these are literally the playgrounds we played on when we grew up. Look, we're fine. Yeah, we all hear that. But they could use some updates in a lot of ways, I think.
So is it that the structures are high, like the height of like the slide, or
Yes.
they haven't been maintained, so they're maybe broken or not functioning properly?
Exactly. One of them is particularly high, and this is an elementary school that goes up to from pre-primary to grade 6, so quite a range. And there's a smaller playground, but the swings are incredibly high. So even a pre-primary kid, that's meant to be their part of the playground, and they can't even get on the swings. The slide and that structure, it looks a little tilted, if I'm being honest. And the one that's below, I love the school. It's not about the school, it's about the playground.
Right.
But the other one, it's incredibly high. And my pre-primary little one, well, last year when she was 3, we would go to bring her sisters to school. She would stay and play. I can't even stand on the ground and reach up and touch her when she's still climbing up.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I like to err on the side of caution when they're first learning those things and be right there just in case. And then I'm going to step back and watch them. But you almost had to step back and watch from the get-go. And that is pretty terrifying when they're so little.
Yeah, that's true. Erin, I see you nodding vigorously when Ashley was describing what that playground looked like. You had a similar experience?
Well, Ashley lives kind of around the corner from me, so I feel like I know which playground that is, like in my mind. But we had, what, it's funny because like as a parent, it's not something you really think about until your kid needs to go out and you like your first kid and you take them to the playground and you're like, wow, there really is such a difference in standards of safety. And, some of the new ones that are, we live close to a military base. So there are a couple playgrounds that are funded by the Canadian military that are near the PMQs. And those are the best playgrounds and they're well maintained. And, they have the cushy floor. So like when the kids do fall,
right,
they kind of bounce and it's okay. But we had occasion this summer, we were at the cottage for a month near Peterborough. So we took the kids to the Peterborough Zoo. And I don't know if this is like known in Ontario, but the playground at the Peterborough Zoo is insane in the best way. So there are actually 3 different play structures. They're all labeled for the ages of children. Every single one of them, and I love this. Every single one of them also has play structures for children who may or may not need a wheelchair or a walker, or and it's all wood chipped or bouncy floors. But one funny thing is that there is the giant slide, which was there when I was a kid because my cousin Ryan and I used to do it, and it was like a death trap then. So they have updated it. The kids will use it, but the adults are afraid of it because it's like a 3-story slide.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you got to climb 9 flights of stairs to get back up from the bottom. So you send your kid down and you're like, I don't know where they're going to end up. So that was like, we have videos of the kids, but the safety aspect for me is that my 2-year-old is fearless. And so to Ashley's point, if she gets up to a height where I can't grab her or stop her from slipping, I don't really know what to do because I don't also want to be that mom. Like everybody knows those moms who like follow their kids on the play structures. I'm like, sometimes I judge those moms. Like, I don't want to be in my late 30s up on the play structure.
Right. Right. Well, if people in Ontario don't know about the Peterborough zoo playground, they hopefully will now by listening to this
It's awesome
podcast.
and it's free and the zoo is free and there's the plug for the Riverside Zoo.
So there you go. And yes, and even with the big slide. Brittany, you talked about the types of play that your kids like to get into, which is more sort of that unstructured play. And Erin, you sort of touched on this with your kids, playing on the beach with rocks and things like that. So that's sort of where they are not necessarily using traditional playground structures like slides and monkey bars and swings, but they're building their own games and creating fun for themselves and using what's, as you said, trees and bark and what's in nature. So how do you balance that need of them playing in those areas, but also managing the risk of potential injury? And maybe Brittany, you can talk a little bit about how you manage that with your children.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually funny, Erin brought up the sort of helicopter mom thing. As my 6-year-old has some medical conditions, so any injury can become potentially life-threatening for him. So one of the things that actually pushed me away from playgrounds was the kind of like challenge to my ego of like, do I want to look like the helicopter mom? Do I want to explain why I'm right up there with him? That kind of thing. Because we know how moms can get at playgrounds sometimes. But yeah, honestly, we have this amazing park right across the street from our house, which has tons and tons of trees and then one absolute death trap slide. So I think it's just been a matter of, encouraging my kids to find other things to play with. All the trees there are fairly low, so they kind of learned early on the ground is nice and grassy. So they were able to build up from there, learn some skills. And then now when we're at the lake or, anywhere with bigger trees, they're able to start going a little higher. And it's really just a matter of developing the gross motor skills they need and kind of learning risk assessments for themselves before I kind of let them loose with anything that might be a bigger risk.
You've touched on a really important point about, assessing what the child themselves is assessing their ability for. And Erin, you touched on this as well, of like, am I able to do that? Am I going to push myself a little bit farther? And how far do you let them do that? Because they do. I mean, that's the, that popping the bubble wrap part is not, keeping them wrapped in a bubble, but letting them explore and push their boundaries. But there is sort of a limit depending on their age and, as you say, their abilities, what they've grown up with and what they've been exposed to. So, assessing your child and hearing from them. I mean, do they tell you, Brittany, like I did that, but it was a bit scary? Or, do they have that kind of assessment of when they do manage to do something that they hadn't done previously?
Yeah, so my 9-year-old is an absolute scaredy cat and always has been. So sometimes it's the other way where we're pushing her a little bit and we see she wants to do something that we know she's fully capable of doing safely. It's a lot more encouragement that way. And my son is just kind of the opposite. So for him, it really is telling him, okay, I see you want to do this. Here's what could happen if you do that. And what's your plan if you fall? What's your plan if you get hurt in this way? Because we need to think about those things too. And ultimately, he's going to be making those choices for himself eventually. So kind of supporting him within the bounds of reasonable risk.
Yeah, exactly. And that changes over time, like over their age development. Erin, your little one, you said, is fearless, and you think, what, she's fearless now, what is she going to be when she's 6, 7, 8, 9 and above?
I worry about that daily, Pam.
Yeah, well, but have you ever had an injury? Has she ever had an injury from doing her fearless things?
No, because she's so self-assured. I actually just think that she, at 2 years of age, can visualize the outcome she wants, and she pretty much gets it. Now, my older one has not let me live down when she was 2 and I let her play on a playground and she says, "Mommy, do you remember that time that you were sitting on the bench and I fell through the hole?" Like she still reminds me of that time that I quote unquote let her fall. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it depends on the kid, right? Like
absolutely.
she's much more timid and clearly remembers everything, and the other one is just full force go. So when I have them both at the playground, I have to just be really mindful of kind of what Brittany was saying, is like the energy of both kids is slightly different and their risk tolerance is slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah. Ashley, between or amongst, I guess, the 3 of your kids, do you have a similar kind of experience with, varying degrees of fearlessness as it is?
Absolutely. I have bookends. My fearless ones are on either end, the oldest and the youngest. And my middle child is very, very timid and wouldn't go down a slide until I think she was maybe 4 or 5, barely jumping off 2 feet, even for fun, like just that kind of timid. So it's quite a range, and it still kind of is. And to both Brittany and Erin's points, like it really depends on the kid and how I'm going to help them or just watch them do what they're doing. I think with my youngest, because she's that much younger than her sisters and because she's Miss Independent and wanting to keep up, she's been the one for us that we've really had to watch. Like she thinks she can do more than she actually can. And we've only seen that luckily in just small things like a fall off the couch or a little, and I know those aren't always small things for everybody, but luckily it was for her. And so when it did come to climbing the bigger structures, I knew I wanted to let her because I know there's an element of risky play that's really beneficial for kids, especially for their confidence. And I'm trying to raise some really confident, mentally strong girls. So I want to let that all happen. I have a little bit of anxiety of my own that I'm just constantly working through too. So I'm constantly like, is this just me and my anxiousness, or are they good? Can they do this? So time after time, they get to show me what they are capable of. And now, because they're a little bit older, I can feel a little bit more confident that they know their own limits. But it took a whole bunch of up and downs and worries and whatnot to get to that point, for sure.
Yeah, and scraped knees, I'm sure. The good news is around playgrounds, there's lots of falls and things like that, but there aren't many serious injuries or deaths, which is great because, as you say, we want kids to be out and playing and pushing their boundaries and building their skills and all of that. We know how important play is in their development and their relationships and their creativity, etc. So, and also, as I said at the beginning, to wear them out so they will go to bed and you can have a few minutes of peace and quiet in the evenings. Erin, my experience was a slightly different than your daughter. My mom was pushing me in a baby swing when I was young, but it didn't have a thing between your legs. So as she pushed me, I slipped out of the swing and like total gravel up my face. And so she was right there and I still fell out of the swing. So, I do bring it up every once in a while. So unfortunately, I think maybe that is still in your future of holding a bit of a grudge.
Yeah. The time she fell through the hole, that'll be the thing. Yeah,
exactly. Well, thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Brittany and Erin, for joining me today. It's been a great conversation. Really enjoyed hearing your stories and your strategies on how to make sure that your kids can get out there and play.
Thanks. That's great.
Thanks for having me.
Encourage your kids to get outside and play. To keep them safe, review our tips at parachute.ca/outdoor play. That's parachute.ca/outdoor play.
It's time to open your parachute.
Dr. Suzanne Beno is a pediatric emergency medicine specialist and medical co-director for trauma at the Hospital for Sick Children. Dr. Beno's professional interests focus on the continuing advancement and improvement of pediatric trauma care and injury prevention through quality improvement in research, medical education, knowledge translation, and advocacy. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me.
So you've been an emergency medicine physician for a number of years. What do you see at the hospital related to play injuries?
Yeah, so play injuries are fairly common presentations to the emergency department. They're usually injuries that are related to falls. That's the main reason
Okay.
that we see kids coming in after play. And so those are usually bruises, scrapes, sometimes fractures, lots of soft tissue injuries. Often these are related to falls from climbers, monkey bars, slides, these kinds of things. We also see a number of minor head injuries, sometimes dental injuries. Sometimes children will
Mm,
butt into each other, knock heads and so forth, or hit structures and knock out a few teeth. Um, there are specific injuries that are related to certain types of play structures. So
hmm.
we have, like in the summer, for example, every evening we have about 5 or 6 kids come in with supracondylar fractures, which we all term the monkey bar injury. So we know
Okay.
that there's seasonality to certain types of play injuries. There are
Hmm.
some specific trampoline related injuries as
Right.
well. And then sometimes just simple lacerations and cuts from, whatever impact they've sustained.
Yeah, those cuts and bruises that are kind of part of the
That's right.
summer experience. For trampolines, we get a lot of questions about trampolines. What kind of injuries do you see from trampolines, and why? I mean, so many people love those, love them. They want them in their backyards, but they can be really dangerous.
Yeah, trampolines are a bit of a double-edged sword. They're a great way for kids to burn off energy and certainly get some exercise. But they do create some risks for injury for sure. Most of the time, we're seeing injuries related to extremity injuries. So they fall and they hurt their arms, sometimes their legs. There's a specific fracture called a jumper's knee, which,
Hmm.
isn't that common, but you sometimes see it with trampoline injuries. Sometimes kids, again, are knocking heads if they're,
Mm.
double bouncing, or if they fall out, if the trampoline, for example, doesn't have netting and they fall onto the ground, they can hit their head. But most of the time, just similar to playground injuries, bruises, scrapes, abrasions, and then soft tissue injuries. If they are breaking bones, it's usually the arms, upper extremities, wrists, and so forth.
I myself sustained a playground injury when I was young. I broke the radial head off my elbow, my left
Uh-huh.
elbow.
Yeah.
Yes, off a slide, fell off a slide. So, those are the kind of things that kind of ruin your summer. Luckily, we've seen really serious injuries from place structures, go down over the years as we replaced concrete with different surfacing in playgrounds. The trend is to, I mean, we call it risky play, but a lot of us, when you describe risky play, is sort of the play that we had when we were growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what tips would you want parents to know about, how to promote play, but also keep safety in mind? Well, like, what do they really have to be aware of as their children play? Because we know there's so many benefits of playing.
Yeah, play is critical. It's an essential part of development, and children need lots and lots of play to learn in this world. And we do too, actually, as adults.
Hmm.
Everybody needs some play. I like the concept of risky play. I like the concept of reasonable risk, and really empowering children to make their own choices,
Hmm.
which builds their confidence, promotes their resiliency. And I think our job as parents, in addition to hopefully raising productive members of society, really is to kind of mitigate the risk, but not insulate them from
Hmm.
it through life, because they need to be challenged, and they need to be exposed to risk in order to learn how to manage that, in their futures. Some of the things that you can do, really, for parents when you're in situations like playgrounds or different player environments, is to think about what's a hazard and what's a risk. So that's one of the definitions that have come out of risky play, is understanding that hazards are dangerous things that children don't have control over, and they may not even be within their situational awareness. So that's the job of a parent, to see those. You can do a little bit of an environmental scan if you like, and just make sure that there isn't anything that would make it hazardous or dangerous for the child playing there, but allow them to assess their own risk, and let them go. You're there, supervise them to the point that's kind of age appropriate and what feels comfortable for you. But children are usually pretty good. Not all children. Some children need a little bit more direction, a little bit more supervision. But a lot of children can dose themselves pretty accurately with the independence that they themselves want to take on. And so I think that's where, as parents, you're there, you're looking out for any of those hazards, you're supervising, eyes on, if they're small children, but you're allowing them to explore that play space and learn from it on their own terms.
So that you allow them to push their boundaries a little bit, but then they kind of check themselves to how far they can go. And as you say, there's, some kids may not have that as well, but it's, parents knowing what their kids can do, what their experience has been even, different kids have different levels of comfort or have different experiences that will aid in their ability to do certain things and not. You are also a parent. So how do you, or how did you approach, safe play? I know your kids are a little bit older than the really young ones, but how did you approach it? Because obviously, you see these things in the emergency department when you take that home. How did that influence some of your decisions?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Pam. In the line of work that we have, or that I have, it's difficult to not always think about the worst case scenario. And I think it's really important to remember that is the rare scenario. Children play all the time and don't get injured very often. So basically, we would try to minimize risks, but let them do mostly everything that they wanted to do. So in fact, if an activity required a helmet, they had to wear a helmet. And that was a non-negotiable, part of the deal. We let them jump on a trampoline, but it was in good condition. It was supervised. They had rules they had to follow. We took them out in nature quite a bit. We had lots of great hikes and forest play when they were smaller. And we took them to playgrounds all the time. And I really enjoyed hearing about the spectrum of playgrounds that the moms were talking about, because I had the same experience. So, they have played in these state-of-the-art design play spaces, even the ones that, became natural scapes. And then also in those playgrounds that look like they hadn't been touched since you and I were kids. So those are the ones where you need to do a little bit of an environmental scan and make sure you don't see any hazards there.
Well, especially if they're that old, they, you want to make sure they're in good working condition. I definitely remembered getting a few scorched legs going down those metal slides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think the message that you are sending about, play is vastly safe. There's very rarely when you get something really serious happening on a playground, and the value of play outweighs the risk of really serious injury on our playgrounds and in play spaces. And, as you say, in nature, on hikes, whatever it is that kids are doing, that is so valuable, to their development. So thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experience, both as an emergency medicine physician, as well as a parent of kids who, engaged in a lot of play. So thanks very much for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Pam.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Popping the Bubble Wrap is a podcast of Parachute, Canada's national injury prevention charity, whose mission is for Canadians to live long lives to the fullest by preventing serious and fatal injuries. We release episodes every 2 weeks. For our next episode, we'll be taking a different approach. I'll be speaking with Erin Jalbert-Jones about child passenger safety. Erin is a child passenger safety technician, but also became an advocate after losing 2 of her children, Haley and Trent, in a crash. Help us reach parents and caregivers by sharing this link with your friends and family and giving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Popping the Bubble Wrap is produced for Parachute by Story Studio Network and Eye Contact Productions.
This is Story Studio Network.